What was the samurai ghost that Kafka saw at the Ryunei shrine? Hello, my wonderful viewers, and welcome to another episode of Betty Adams Overanalyzes. This is not the first video I've done on this topic, but I keep seeing the questions crop up online again and again and again. What was that ghost? So I'm going to take this time to take a look at the two major theories, the one that I prefer, and what Ryunei Shrine is all about, and how Matsumoto cheats on his world building, or rather uses the real world to make his world building so much deeper, because this is just a brilliant example of how you can consistently use what people know about the real world to just expand your world building. There will be spoilers through chapters 65 and 66, so you have been warned. If you don't want to hear any of those, you can go check out the links below the video to get yourself a copy of my book, Humans Are Weird, I Have the Data, a collection of short, absurd science fiction stories. After the glamour of first contact wears off, what will our little green friend think of us? Kafka. He has just been granted freedom, a larger amount of freedom by the Defense Force after revealing his true nature. He's proven himself, and he's being allowed to interact with more and more of his friends and coworkers. And he gets to interact with Hoshina, Vice Captain Hoshina, for the first time since his reveal. Now, this is different in the anime and manga. He does get a very short interaction with Hoshina in the anime, but in the manga, this is the first time he's even seen the Vice Captain since he revealed his nature as Kaiju number 8. They have an interesting... They have a pretty amusing confrontation. After all, these are two very similar men, and they're both kind of derpy socially. And then Vice Captain Hoshina decides to train Kafka in order to avoid observation by the rest of the Defense Force, because, as we learn later, they can't trust anybody not to reveal things to Kaiju number 9, because if Kaiju number 9 captures people, he can literally strip their memories out of their brain. So they go to a place where they won't be observed. Vice Captain Hoshina takes Kafka to a place called Ryunei Shrine. It is this very classic shrine that was built to honor the great Kaiju cataclysm of 1657. And Matsumoto takes several panels to make a point of this. Hoshina asks Kafka, do you know what this place is? And once Kafka knows the name, he's like, yeah, we learned about this in our textbook. A kaiju attacked this place in 1657, and it was one of the worst kaiju attacks of that era. Now, they're still in Tokyo here, and I thought, Matsumoto's being awfully specific about this, and Matsumoto likes to tie his physics, his biology, and his history into real-world events. So I researched the 1657 disaster in Tokyo, and I found out about the Great Fire of 1657, which just killed thousands of people. Tokyo was or Edo at the time as it was called, was a very compact, densely packed city. A fire broke out in some lumber yards and spread and just destroyed so much of the city, and thousands of people died, and many shrines were destroyed. Over 350 shrines were destroyed. So afterwards, the city planners completely restructured how they developed their cities. They drained swamps to expand the city so it wouldn't be so crowded, to allow for better evacuation. And again, remember, this is 400 years ago, over 400 years ago now. They very specifically built these shrines in a ring around the destroyed area. And Ryunei Shrine is a sort of fictional homage to those real-life shrines that were built. So this is a beautiful example of world building. But going on with the story, who was that ghost? So Vice Captain Hoshina makes a big point that some of his ancestors are buried there because this shrine is dedicated to kaiju slayers. Because in the Kaiju number 8 universe, it wasn't a fire that started in a lumber mill or a lumber storage area. It was a fire-based kaiju, and because they did not have modern technology at the time, they had to deal with it with conventional methods. And in the series, in the manga rather, we are shown this beautiful image done in the exact same art style as the historic references to a fire that showed how the kaiju slayers at the time worked. We see pikemen with long weapons, paralyzing, trying to take out the kaiju's legs. We see cavalrymen with horses coming in, sweeping in from the flanks in rapid movement. We see weapons, because at this time Japan did have firearms. And we see multiple units of kaiju slayers taking out this giant kaiju. And again, it's all done in a way that very much mimics the historical style of the documents we see from the real life. And so Vice Captain Hoshina says, "My ancestors are buried here," which is a very interesting thing that he stresses. He runs Kafka through the paces, says, okay, we're going to train. Then the main thing is, though, as they leave, Kafka turns around as they're about to leave, and he bows respectfully, pays his respects to the fallen kaiju slayers in the shrine. For if you're an American or a Brit, the similar thing that you do would be if you went to the tomb of the unknown soldier, or rather say a current active duty officer goes to the tomb of the unknown soldier, the tombs that we've set up to honor those nameless who've fallen in battle. And then saluting at the changing of the guard at the tomb of the unknown soldier. So this is the kind of scene that we're looking on. It's very meaningful, just a moment in the story of one soldier paying tribute to those who fell before him in battle. Very nice, very meaningful. And when Kafka stands up, his senses kind of spritz out like we've seen them do before when his kaiju detecting sense was warning him of a kaiju. But instead of seeing a kaiju, he sees a samurai warrior with a face mask that looks a lot like Kaiju number 8's bone mask. And then Kafka goes, huh, and blinks, and it's gone. And then Vice Captain Hoshina says, come on, what are you doing? And then they leave. So a lot of people have been asking recently online, what was that? Well, there are two separate theories. The first one is that in the shrine was the body, probably of one of Vice Captain Hoshina's ancestors, of another kaiju shifter like Kafka who died in battle. And the little guy inside Kafka was activating this kaiju sense because this was such a powerful warrior that, because remember, Kafka's kaiju sense will activate if he's in close range of a powerful kaiju, even if he's not transformed. So the logical conclusion of this theory is that one of Vice Captain Hoshina's ancestors, or someone who fought with them, was a kaiju shifter like Kafka, died in battle, was buried at the Ryunei shrine, and as Kafka is standing there paying homage to the shrine, the little guy warns him, there is the dead body of a very seriously powerful kaiju in that area. But because it was a dead body, the warning was not strong enough to really disturb Kafka. It's just like, hey, just so you know, dead body of a kaiju down there. That's the first theory, that this was Kafka's kaiju detecting sense activating, recognizing another kaiju shifter like himself. However, later on, we are introduced to another possibility. So this is the second theory, and the one that I think that's more likely at this point. When we see Kikoru training with Captain Narumi in the lead up to the big battle with Kaiju number 9, Kikoru goes to him and says, hey, I know this sounds weird, but I'm seeing visions of my mother when I'm training with weapon number 4. And Captain Narumi goes, oh, yeah, that's not normal, but we know about that. If a numbered weapon these weapons that are made from the bodies of particularly powerful kaiju, has more than one user, the weapon will retain a memory of previous users. And if the wielder happens to be doing something very similar to something that the previous user did, that the new weapons user will see a ghost or an afterimage of the previous user doing that same thing. In Kokoru's case, when she was training in the fighting style that her mother had developed for weapon number 4, which is a very speed-based, ranged melee attack, so she's got a long, powerful weapon like a battle axe or a halberd. And Kokoru would see images of her mother training before her, and she used those images to force herself to go faster because she had to keep up with her mother's speed. If this then is the cause of the ghost that Kafka saw, what we go back to that concept of what was Kafka doing at the time, because weapons users see those ghosts when they are in situations similar to or very close to identical to the previous user. That would imply that little guy had a previous host, someone before Kafka, over 400 years ago, who he was working with, this samurai in the armor that we saw. And that at some point in the past, the little guy, with his previous host, came to this shrine sometime in the past 400 years and showed respect or bowed to the previous fallen at the shrine. So if this theory is true, little guy had a previous host before Kafka. The little guy and his host came to this shrine, and as they were leaving after training, bowed to the fallen soldiers in the shrine. And then Kafka caught a glimpse of this as the numbered weapons ghost as he was doing the same thing. I think that given the evidence that we have right now, this is the most likely scenario. And whether it was exactly the same kaiju little guy that caused this, or little guy is a descendant or a different generation and just happens to retain the genetic memories of his ancestors, we can't say at this point. But I do think that this is the most likely explanation for the ghost that Kafka saw at Ryunei Shrine. That little guy has the memories of, or it is much older than we thought, that sometime in the past 400 years, the previous host of little guy came to this shrine and paid respect at the shrine. That would be a very pleasing aesthetic. It's like saluting a ghost at Arlington or saluting a ghost at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. So I'm kind of leaning towards that one. I think that's the one that the clues point to. But tell me what you think in the comments below. Do you think that we are looking at a numbered weapon ghost here, i.e. a memory preserved in little guy of a previous host, or was this the little guy's kaiju detecting sense, and rather than being a previous host, the little guy was just trying to warn Kafka, hey, he's basically dead, but there is a super powerful kaiju down there. What do you think? Hit that like and subscribe button, and peace out, my wonderful viewers.
Escape into another world with the writings of author Betty Adams. 2 worlds, one of utter absurdity, one of dramatic tension, both alike in aliens absolutely astounded by human behavior. Humans are weird, short, absurd science fiction stories. Flying sparks, dragons, aliens, and things that go boom in the night.
Books available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo by Rakuten, Google Play Books, and at authorBettyAdams.com for a signed copy.